Have you ever wondered why we sometimes just find weak spots or thin spots in the middle of our locks? Isn't that kind of odd? Well, in today's video, I'm going to give you 6 reasons why this may happen to you. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, my name is Atreyu. Thank you for clicking on this video. This channel is all about positivity and unconditional love, where we talk about locks, from lock care to lock repair, and a few other things. Before we get started, I'm going to quickly ask you to please scroll a little bit down and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and hit the like button. So let's get into today's topic. I got a comment from Yvette Collins, and I thought it would be a wonderful topic to bring to an Ask Atreyu video. It reads, I was afraid to tie knots in my locks because I had read other comments where some people said their locks snapped off. I used to just cut the locks off at the weak spot, but I stopped doing that when I noticed a thin spot in the middle of a really long lock. So a few months ago I started tying knots in those locks. All I can say is so far, so good. But why do locks stand out in the middle like that? It drives me crazy. Is it dryness, too much manipulation, or just something that happens? I tried to look for videos about this, but most of them talk about breakage from the root/scalp. So I thought this was a wonderful question, and I think it's something that many of us can relate to, especially those of us who have hair that grows away from our locks. So yeah, I said it. So that is a wonderful segue to the first point, the first reason, the first cause of weak spots or thin spots in our locks. If our hair grows away from our locks. Even Yanni, the great Yanni the lockologist, I know she doesn't put herself up there, but she's very knowledgeable. She has the insight because she comes across so many different heads and sets of locks. You know, doing various clients so many days a week and just seeing things, that gives her the knowledge and insight that a lot of us lockers just could never have, because we're only familiar with our own hair. But she gets to see locks day in and day out from people with all types of textures, people who have hair that grows into their locks and away from their locks. I mean, it's just a very good place to be, to actually learn a lot about locks. But even she, if you look at her locks, have a lot of thin spots in her locks. You might be wondering, how could someone like Yanni have thin spots or weak spots in her locks? Well, it's because she has hair that grows away from her locks. She has admitted this several times now, and she only gets maintenance once or twice a year. I think the last time, it was actually over a year since the last time she got a little bit of maintenance. I'll show you. Let me insert this clip so you can see the weak spots in her locks.
I have not done my hair in over a year. It's been about, I think about a year and a half, I don't know. So I finally got my sister to come up, and she's hooking up my hair, and it's a lot of new growth. It's very disrespectful. So like if you look, you see my locks look like they're thinning. It's actually not. I have that type of hair. You see it there? It looks like it's thinning. Right, I have that hair that grows away from my locks, so she's the only person I cannot do my own hair, which is crazy. Ever since I was a child, we were just talking about that. So if you look at my locks, you might think it's thinning out. Like, I'm trying to get one to show you. I didn't feel for it. Not it. All right, like if you look at this, see how it looks like it's thinning? It's actually not. All my new growth grows away from my locks like this. I got a lot of clients with it, but it's I don't promote techniques. They're all bad for you here, so please don't ask me about techniques. I'm just saying, yeah, my locks, my sister's saying it's in the kitchen, my locks grows with an afro. So I have the afro and then the locks. All right, look, I think you're seeing one poking out. There we go. See that? See how it's looking? Like if I sneeze, it will fall out. Most likely it would if I do sneeze. Right. But around it have all this disrespect. So my sister has to put it back into it with a different technique we used to do in Trinidad. And it could only be done for people who hair grows like mine. My whole hair grows like this. Very disrespectful.
Okay, so from that video, you see that she talks about using a special technique that they do back in Trinidad to combat the hairs that grow away from the locks, okay? So for people who have hair that grows away from their locks, you're gonna get weak spots because not all of those hairs are going into the locks when they should be. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I've seen people who are very strict and rigid about their maintenance schedule, and you'll look at their locks and they may have had locks for over 10 years, but they have some of the most perfect cylindrical consistent locks from root to tip. Like it's like just the perfect cylinder. And I think it's because their retwist schedule is so consistent and because it's frequent enough that it doesn't allow for hair to escape their locks. I think it also could be due to the fact that maybe their hair grows into their locks, so they don't really have to worry about it as much. So I'm gonna make number one: if your hair grows away from your locks, you are in greater risk of getting weak spots. And that's also why I have incurred weak spots from time to time along my lock quest. Number two is that even after maintenance, even after you do something like the braid technique, which is what I do to put those hairs back in, even after you gather that new growth and wrap it around the lock the way I used to do, that hair, because of its coily nature, if you have a texture like mine, it's gonna coil back up, right? You may stretch it out along the lock, and I have a video about this too. But if you're just wrapping it around the lock, it can coil up and leave, a smaller weak spot than what was there before. So maybe the weak spot was like this, and then you gathered your new growth, wrapped it around the lock, and it came down, but then maybe you started sweating, it got damp, and so the hair, because of its coily nature, started to coil back up the length of the lock, so then you get a little bitty weak spot, okay? So even after maintenance, whether you're braiding the new growth into the lock, whether you're wrapping the hair around the lock, whatever it is, it can still coil up and expose a little bitty weak spot in your locks. Number three is excessive bleaching and dyeing. Yes, it is true that dyeing your hair is not as harsh as just straight up bleaching it. So I really want to focus on the bleaching. When you bleach your hair, you break down your hairs. You strip your hair. You're basically wearing down its integrity, right? You've broken down its integrity so that it can absorb color if you plan on dyeing it, which is often step two after people bleach their hair, right? So because you've broken it down, it's lost a lot of its vitality, and that just automatically weakens it. And this will segue into number four because it's kind of related. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but oftentimes it is. When you break down the hair, it is lacking moisture. So because of dryness and brittleness, strands will begin to break. Now you may think of locks as being super strong because it's just matted hair, and that is the case, that is true, right? But if you think about the individual strands that are matted, those strands can still break. Just because it's matted doesn't mean that it's impossible for the individual strands to weaken to a point where they can't break. And so that ends up happening. And when that happens, due to the excessive dryness and the brittleness, basically the lack of moisture, then you get weak spots as well. All right, and then the last two fall under one umbrella. If you're doing your maintenance with less hair coming from your scalp. So this can happen for two reasons. Number five would be if you are alternating part sizes. Maybe you've had locks for 7 years, and over that period of time, you maintain your own hair and your parts are not exactly identical. Meaning when you separate your locks, maybe you have hair that grows away from your locks, and like me, you reestablish your parts, you're trying to get the hair that should go onto a lock and separate out the hair that doesn't go into the lock. Maybe the actual section is smaller than what it was previous to retwists. Then that means you're having less hair going into the lock, which will lead to a thin spot, right, or a weak spot. Just think about it, you're putting fewer hairs into the lock. So obviously the lock is going to be smaller in that area where there are fewer hairs. And then finally number 6, which also falls under the umbrella of retwisting or interlocking or whatever method you use, fewer hairs is if you're thinning at the scalp. If you don't have as much hair to retwist with or to interlock with, then the lock is going to be smaller. If it's significant enough, it will leave a thin spot. So it's very important that you do everything that you can to make sure you have enough new growth when you're retwisting your locks. If you notice that you're thinning out at the roots, then I would just wait and let the new growth grow in before you retwist. I mean, just think about it. The point of retwisting or doing any maintenance is to put that hair back into the lock, or to, you know, put the hair into the appropriate lock. But if you don't have hair to put there, then what are you doing it for? Okay, so hopefully this answers your question, Yvette Collins, and hopefully it helps people to better understand why we get weak spots, why we get thin spots in the middle of our locks. They can occur at any place, but it's really particularly scary when we have a long lock and then there's a weak spot, right? Because cutting off the lock at that point is no longer an option, because you're not trying to lose all that length. If any of you have experience with thin spots or weak spots, please comment below. And if you can think of any other causes, feel free to write those in as well. This is a community and we just want to help one another. If you guys have any more questions, please feel free to submit them to me so that I can answer them in an Ask Atreyu video. And as always, please learn to love unconditionally, because loving with conditions conditions the heart to not really love at all. Atreyu is out.